My gun jammed twice actually during the fight. During that situation, I did not realize my gun jammed because I remember pointing my gun and pulling the trigger, but nothing happened. You just hear that click.
Hey gang, I guarantee if you're watching the main channel, you're seeing these videos of people in self-defense encounters all the time. People start bleeding, they start bleeding fast. And we as self-defenders should be interested in all the tools that can protect and preserve innocent life. And good trauma gear can do that. It's just as important as a firearm, maybe more so. Listen, trauma is trauma. Whether it's a vehicle accident, a farming accident, or a gunshot wound, when seconds count, you need the right equipment for the job. You must get your trauma gear from a reputable source, and Mountain Man Medical is ASP's go-to source for all of our medical gear. Go to mountainmanmedical.com and let them know you heard about them on the ASP Podcast. All right, gang, check it out. This week's guest, his defensive encounter was actually captured on video and was featured on the Active Self-Protection main channel back on May 10th of 2022. So go check that out. It'll give you some frame of reference for this episode, so enjoy. All right, gang, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, as always, Mike Willover, your favorite former Fed. With us today, a young man by the name of Matthew Villegas. Matthew was featured prominently on the main channel not too long ago, as he was in a pretty harrowing shootout in a marijuana dispensary in the Los Angeles area. Matthew is 21 years old. He is single. Ladies, he's single. He lives in the LA area, and he works as a security guard and bud tender, kind of like a bud sommelier at a shop in the Compton area. Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
So Matthew reached out to us after this thing, and we have to vet this stuff. We can't just take everyone at their word that they are who they say they are. And I was pretty stoked to find out it was actually him, and he was actually the person featured in the video, because there's a lot of lessons coming out of this video, and I'm sure Matthew will be able to fill us in on all the stuff, the blank spots that we don't know about. But first, Matthew, are you from the LA area originally? Is that where you're originally from?
Yes.
And what part of LA did you grow up in?
Southgate.
Okay. So people who aren't from Southern California, LA is not a monolith. There's like 8,000 cities around Los Angeles. All of them very different, all of them very distinct. They all have their own flavor, their own sort of culture. So I think it's kind of cool to know specifically what part he is from. And in the past, growing up as a kid, did you grow up around guns, around firearms? Was that something that was in your household? Was your dad a cop, grandpa in the army, anything like that?
Absolutely not. My dad was actually very strict, keeping the guns away from the kids. He did have a gun, but no one in the family knew about it besides him. I was actually able to figure that out after he passed away. So he just kept it real clean and good, keeping it away. Wanted us as the kids to be out of danger, not even think about having a firearm, just be really good kids. But after I was doing security, they had me do the shooting test at the range, and that's when I fell in love with firearms.
Yeah, back to your dad for a second. There's kind of one of two ways to go, I think, when you have a firearm in the home, when you have kids in the home. One way is to keep it a secret, which hopefully you can do, and your dad obviously did successfully. The other one is to expose your kids to the guns, let them handle them safely, get all the curiosity out of them, because just having a gun in your nightstand and saying, don't touch that, that's a recipe for disaster. That's not the way to go. At any rate, so you hired on as a security guard. Was it a security company, or did you get your own card, or how does that work?
So I was referred to someone. You just go there. He gives you, you do a couple tests. You pay for it, and you get your guard card after doing a test. Mm-hmm. Then after that, you can proceed to do guard card with firearm carry. That's a whole different test and a whole different payment. It's a long process in the mail, but eventually they mail out the guard card to you and everything else.
So walk us through the test. The part I'm curious, especially at the part where you have that firearms endorsement on your guard card. Can you kind of give us an idea of what that's like, what the testing is like? Is there a written test? Is it just range time? Or walk us through that real quick. I'm sure our audience is curious to know how that works.
Yeah, no problem. So the regular guard card or whatever, just regular guard without firearm, you just watch a couple of videos. And the class after that, it's basically a pass. And then if you want to do the firearm, they have you sit down, read a book, and then after that, answer questions. and the answers are all over the book. So you really have to read a big chapter of the book to understand the answers of the questions. Um, they would ask parts of the gun, like revolvers and the handgun. Where is the hammer? Where is the grip? Where is the slide? And then after you pass that test, you have to watch a couple more videos on how to properly use your firearm and how to properly know when to use it while you're doing security at a grocery store or wherever it might be, so you won't get in trouble by the law. And then after that, you go to the shooting range, and they test you right there. After the shooting range, you wait 2 to 3 months, and they give you an attitude test in the mail. You go take the attitude test, and they'll ask questions like random questions if you're good with if you go out to parties a lot. Um, then they'll ask you math questions at the end to see if you know basic knowledge, and they'll just ask you a lot of questions like that. After the attitude test, you have your guard card with the firearm carry, and you can work with that.
Interesting. So is there any, you said you went to the range and you had to shoot some kind of qualification course. Was there any hands-on firearms training? What I mean by that is you're at a shooting range and there is an instructor giving you instruction on how to shoot the gun, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so before we went to the shooting range, he had us load up a clip magazine with dummy bullets. He had us properly how to hold the gun and aim the gun towards the wall in a safe direction to make sure your stance is okay and make sure your holding's okay. And then once everyone had a turn to hold the gun, load the gun, we went to the shooting range and we shot a Glock 17 9mm, 50 rounds each person. And once you shoot those 50 rounds and it was your first time, it's definitely a changing experience. And yes, he was there to while we were at the shooting range. He was next to us, making sure how to shoot the gun properly. Some people will still have their finger on the trigger, which is a big, no to a lot of people,
Sure.
even to beginners. Um, and when the gun jams, he's right there next to you to help you unjam the gun.
Clear malfunctions, that sort of thing. Interesting. So, police officers, sheriff's deputies, federal agents, all have to qualify, varying schedules. Some places it's once a year, some places it's twice or 3 times or 4 times a year. So as a firearms indoor security guard in the state of California, is there a schedule like that where every year you have to go out and qualify and be certified, or how does that work?
Yes, there's actually I can't remember if it's 4 years or 3 years, but it's one of those, I believe.
Okay. All right. Very good. So talk to us for a second about how you end up working in a marijuana dispensary with a firearm. It's a kind of unique environment, and people may not know. In Arizona, recreational marijuana is legal, medicinal marijuana is legal, and every shop pretty much has armed security for obvious reasons because it's a huge target for thieves, and there's a lot of cash being going through a marijuana dispensary. A lot of times, credit card companies won't work with them, so it's a cash-only business. Plus, there's a bunch of marijuana, so it's very inviting for someone to attempt to rob a place like that or burglarize it. So, what drew you towards that sort of assignment versus anything else?
Well, I was working at Pizza Hut at the moment, and it's mostly a luck kind of thing. I would pick up from the people that would deliver to me, and I would always ask them if I can work with them. They always shove me to the side. Oh yeah, what's your number? What's your name? And they never got back to me.
Hmm.
But one day they needed people really bad, and I walked in one of the shops, and he was there at the moment when he was looking for people, and he was like, "Hey, didn't you want a job?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And that's when I started working with them. The pay was almost triple times better than uh, Pizza Hut, so it would be foolish of me not to take up the opportunity. I knew what I was getting into too, on all the danger risks, um, but the money was actually way too good to pass up. So I actually started off as a bud tender. Then he would lose securities. Securities would leave, and it's kind of hard for him to find armed security that are all legit. So he showed me the right direction on where to get a firearm and where to go to get my firearm license and my guard card. So I follow those steps, and I'm thinking to myself, well, securities make the same amount of money almost as the shop, so I'm just gonna get my qualifications and bounce out. Um, so he showed me the right direction. I started out as a bud tender, then I made my way up as a security guard, and eventually I was moved to Compton when I had all my qualifications, and I was an armed guard right there. And you get a pay raise too, so that was a neat thing to have.
So you're immediately upon becoming adding the additional responsibility of armed security guard, your pay is raised even more than it already was. So that's pretty sweet. So the day of this incident, how long had you been working there?
Um, Almost 3 years, probably 2.5 years.
And were there any other incidents remotely close to this intense prior to that? Because I know, pot shop can draw some kind of wacky folks. Anything previous to this that happened that would be of interest?
Yeah, so we had a shop in Downey, and they there was a lot of robberies. They got robbed. I actually walked in the wrong time. Just a worker at the shop. There's two people at the shop. I went to go get McDonald's for my friend since he didn't have a car. And when I came back, um, they were actually getting robbed, and I walked in on it, and that's when I was a part of the robbery too. And he got me, had us both in the back, and yeah, just a lot of robberies in the shop. It happens very often.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason there's armed guards at all these dispensaries. Even here in Arizona, if you drive by the dispensaries, there's usually some pretty visible security guys out front. They pretty much look like police officers at this point, wearing ballistic vests outside and duty belts, the whole 9 yards. So the day of this incident, we spoke briefly before I hit the record button. You said that was one of the very few days you were by yourself in the shop. So you were both bud tending and security guarding at the same time. That about what time does this thing go down?
This happened around, I want to say around 7, around there, or 6. Can't remember the time. Um, but every day, there would be one security, one butt tender, so this security can just do his job and watch the cameras and not be unfocused on serving people. But that one day, I don't know why he had it like that, but Sundays was the day I was by myself the whole day, which was very unlucky of me.
So you're alone in there on Sunday, and people, I encourage you to go back and watch the video on the main channel. It's pretty crazy. You're in there. Looks like there's no other customers at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And these four guys walk in, but I'm suspecting you knew something was up right from the jump, because the way they walked in wasn't sort of normal. They sort of walked in like staggered in stages. They weren't together as a group, and they start fanning out right away. Did you perceive there was some sort of shenanigans going on at that point?
Yeah, so the guy in the red jacket, the one that was actually the one that pulled the firearm on me, he's the one. He robbed us back in February, but I wasn't there. It was my coworker, and they showed us the video, and I seen his face and everything. And when he came in that day, I was like, this guy looks very familiar,
Hmm.
but I was not able to, tell that it was him from before, which is a bad trait of mine, not remembering faces, especially all the faces we get inside the shop. And he's not a regular customer. He's just a guy that someone told about. So he just came that one time. I had to try and remember his face. Um, he came in. He looks very familiar. Even if I didn't know that he did rob us, um, and he's already inside the shop, I can't just start shooting him without him, pulling the gun at me and making a threat at me. So he actually came in first with the other guy that had his face blurred, the skinny guy,
Mm-hmm.
and they came in, both of them, first. And he was looking at the bud, telling me, "Pull this one out." And I had something, a feeling in my gut. You get that feeling in your gut. So I'm standing in the phase like of seeing both of them, because the other guy's towards my back, and I don't want to have someone facing on my back, behind me.
Sure.
So I'm facing both of them, pulling out, the jars, whatever he wants to see. Then he gets hesitant, and he's like, "Nah, let's just go." So they start walking out towards the front door, and that his two buddies are already waiting at the door, but they can't come in because they we have a lock where I'm able to let them in and let them out.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in, I lock the door and you can't get out. Even if you pull, trying to lock the door, there's no way for you to get out without me flipping the switch. Um, so I open the door for them so they can leave. The other two guys come in. That's when you see the other guys come to the side, the one that didn't have their face blurred in the video. And the other people decide to come walk back in. And I told them, close the door. He left it wide open. So he closes the door, and then you see me on the phone too. I'm trying to call my boss, trying to tell him to bring back up. We have another shop in Compton, so hopefully, he's able to tell them to hurry up and come over here and help me out since I'm by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Then he closes the door, and you see my hands wave up, and I'm telling them, so now you want to pick up, and that's when I face towards the other guy, and then that's when he just has a gun to my face. Did have a green laser. I didn't believe it was zeroed, but you never know who you're facing with. So I'm just assuming because why have a laser? I'd rather have a red dot. But that's just you taking guesses and gambles on yourself. But yeah, that's when the story begins, when he points the gun at my face.
Real quick, for our listeners who may not be familiar with this sort of loss prevention stuff, I assume the door lock that you can't get out unless you're allowed out is a loss prevention thing in case someone wants to grab some weed off the counter and head for the door.
Yes.
Okay. Not really intended for armed robberies.
He does intend it for armed robberies too. He wants them to stay in if there's a shootout so they can't run out, like how they were trying to run out. And yeah, that's basically what he wanted.
Yeah, I would call my boss if I were you and tell him that's not what that's for. If those guys could have ran out the door, they might have run out the door and it might have ended differently. You know what I mean? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Sadly, I was shot, so I wasn't able to finish my job, but I do not like evil, and I do not want those guys on the street anymore. If I was able to take all four of them out, I would have. The door, I actually do like. A lot of people do like that door, and when the door malfunctions and anyone's able to open it, they immediately call the boss and tell him, hey, we need someone to fix that door. So a lot of people feel more safer. The employees feel more safer when that door is locked. So I actually do like it.
Very well. So in the video, you can see these other three gentlemen are sort of staggered around the store. And you can see in the security footage, the guy in the red pulls a gun out. And for some reason, he's pulling his gun out way, way by the front door. So he's about as far away from you as he can get in the store, pulling the gun out. At what point did you realize he had drawn a gun? Was it immediately, or did you not see it right away?
I did not see it right away. I was looking towards his friends, the ones with the faces not blurred. Once he was directly in my face, it was pretty fast too. When he was in my face and I seen that green laser, I just stared at him for a while. I did not remember me even holding my gun for that quick second. I thought I'd rapid draw, which was still kind of a fast draw, but I thought I pulled it out way faster than that.
Mm-hmm.
And my gun jammed twice actually during the fight. And during that situation, I did not realize my gun jammed. I had it in the back of my head. Maybe it did jam, maybe it didn't, because I remember pointing my gun and pulling the trigger, but nothing happened. You just hear that random click. And by instinct, I just knew already to help it reload, pull the slide back, help it slide one on top. And when I was talking to homicide detectives, I did ask. He was asking me questions if I go to the range, and if I do go to the range, do I practice for jams if my gun malfunctions? If I practice for that, and I told him, you don't really practice for that. If your gun jams during the range, you should automatically know how to help it instead of keep bugging the person that works there to help your gun. It's jammed,
Right.
So
there are malfunction drills though. We certainly did it with my agency. Just that you'd set up a malfunction. So you might put you might have someone else load a magazine for you, for example, and they might put 2 live rounds and then a dummy round, or a shell casing and then a couple more live rounds and a dummy round, and then that would induce that malfunction. So the gun would go bang bang click, and then when it went click and the slide wasn't locked back, it just gives your brain a moment to work through the problem. So if it happens in a gunfight, it's not the first time you have to deal with a malfunction. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So walk me through the sequence of events. The guy comes up, points a gun in your face. Who shoots first?
By the video that I watched, I believe I thought I shot first, but by looking at the video in slow motion, it did look like he pulled the shot out first, and I pulled out a shot second. That shot did hit my cheek, went down my neck on my right side, and went out my back, which is kind of hard to picture how it goes down like that. Um, when I was on the floor, you see the other guy shoot while I'm on the floor. That shot actually hit my vest below my armpit. That one did save my life. That what do you call it? Ballistic vest
Mm-hmm.
is called Safe Life, and that one's a really good one because it protects you all around. You know, instead of the metal ones that just protect you in the front and the back. So that one actually did save my life. I really like that one.
Just a quick note here for the people listening. Matthew earlier said that he wishes he could have taken all four of them out. And some of you may be thinking, well, that's not a very good attitude to have. That's not very Christian of him. If you've never been shot or shot at, it's hard to describe the feeling when you come to the quick realization that someone else is trying to take your life away from you. And the sort of, the seeing red doesn't even describe it. The sort of visceral rage that one experiences is like nothing else. So he's been shot in the face. The other guy, Matthew's on the ground at this point. He's really no threat to anybody. The other guy just shoots at him anyway, just for funsies. And that's the sort of thing that will engender that sort of rage in someone. Let me ask you this. When you were shot in the cheek, did you immediately realize you were shot? Did you immediately feel the pain, or did it take you a second?
When I got shot, I was able to smell the gunpowder, and I was able to. My ear was dinging. You know, you hear that little ring.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it, but not as much. Not like you're about to cry and you're like, oh, I got shot. I felt it, but then I guess the adrenaline kicked in. I scrambled around real quick. I finally got up because I'm like, hey, I'm in a gunfight. These people are not gonna stop. So I got up, did not feel any pain. You see me go left and right. I went to the other side. I went to my right side because on the left side, they were shooting all towards the left side. So if I'm standing right there on the left side, I'm going to get shot. So I try and use that metal divider that's in the shop as protection. And I go to my right side, trying to focus. Me going back and forth is just the adrenaline, I believe, and me just trying to shoot, trying to scare them off too. I definitely was not aiming as good as I should, but I was aiming towards the direction they were at, trying to.
So for people listening who haven't seen the video or may not be able to watch the video right away, let me paint a picture for you. So in the foreground of the video is you're looking at the inside of the counter, glass countertop, typical store countertop. Matthew is behind the counter, and there is a display, a double-sided display that comes out in like a T formation, and there's room to move around it in all directions. So when these guys start shooting, when they start to retreat, when Matthew isn't a willing victim and shoots back, they start to retreat towards the back of that, and they are moving back and forth. They are on both sides of that other end of that display case. So he's, understandably trying to cover both sides of it because he doesn't know who's on which side and who's armed and who isn't. He shoots you. Your first shot is a malfunction, or your second shot?
Hard to tell during the shootout. Everything happened very fast. I just knew one of my shots malfunctioned, and then when the homicide police told me if I practiced for that, I asked them if my gun did jam because I had a feeling it did. He said, yeah, my gun jammed twice. And I was like, wow. And that gun was actually my coworker's gun, the other security that be working there. He does not oil his gun at all, and I highly recommend everyone to oil their gun.
Yeah, I was gonna make that a teaching point. First things first, listeners, if you're in this position, whether you're a security guard, a cop, or a self-defender, you should always know the condition of your gun, always be the one who maintains your gun. Really avoid borrowing guns that you haven't shot before. Avoid borrowing guns you don't know the condition of, because people will say, "Oh, this or that gun runs dirty real good," and just don't listen to that. That's nonsense. There's no reason after you go to the range. There's no reason not to just do a basic breakdown and cleaning of your firearm, whether it's a rifle or a pistol or what have you. It takes me just to do a quick maintenance clean of any of my polymer frame striker fired pistols. It takes 5 minutes just to get it, knock the big hunks of dirt off, slap some oil on it, put it back together, function check it. It's not a big deal. So, can I ask the make and model of the gun that you borrowed from your coworker?
Yeah, it was a Glock 19 9mm, which
Okay.
I after that day I dislike. I don't like 19s anymore.
Yeah, I carried the 19 and the 17 previously. The Glock 19 is the Honda Civic of the firearms world. It's just kind of it's a basic gun that usually works if it's maintained properly. I can understand after having that experience how you would be sour on the 19, but I still think it's a pretty good everyday maintenance gun. 17, I prefer the 17 personally. I just feel like it's more of a tack driver than the 19. It's just somehow that little extra bit of barrel and grip helps me be a little bit more accurate. So your shot, you get down behind the counter. You had a malfunction at some point. You're shot again by this guy's accomplice. Did he shoot through the display case?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought I saw in the video. And in total, do you know how many rounds you fired during this gunfight?
I fired 10. After my 10, I let them out. I opened the door for them so they can run out. I did have an extra clip on my hip. I carry that extra clip just in case I have to double load, in whatever situation I am. But I chose not to reload my magazine because I guess they hit a nerve and I'm leaking like a water fountain. And I see blood coming out. And at that moment, blood's going on my hand and on my phone because I try and get my phone out for help. So my first thought is, I'm dying. I'm hit in the face. I'm dying, which was not the case. So try not to lose any hope when you're in a situation like that. Just fight your way through it. Once they're let out, they all run out. I run out as well, looking for help so someone can help me. I run to the liquor store next to me. As soon as I walk in the door, everyone's towards the back of the liquor store, and they're just taking cover. Everyone's scared. You can see all the scared faces on them. I said, "Help, help." Apparently, someone in the store had her daughter, and she said, "Please, not here. Go somewhere else." But I didn't hear that at the moment. I just had that feeling no one was going to help at that moment. No one was running towards
Welcome
me.
to Los Angeles, by the way.
Yeah. So I run out the liquor store and I actually go to the store that's on the right side of me, which is like a beauty hair place called Fridays. And the guy came out to see what happened, the owner. And I said, "Please help me." And he actually did help me. Kind of good friends with him. He always has a positive attitude and really good Samaritan. Was able to, say, "I'm doing okay." Was able to get his phone out, call for help. Not a big deal. And 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute after, probably like a minute and a half, the cops pull up first and they kept asking me questions. I was getting irritated by the questions since I'm shot and I just needed help. I just wanted help. That's the main thing I wanted. But they kept asking how many people were there. Easy answer for. What car were they in? I was not able to see. I think I was able to see when they drove off. It looked like an Impala, like a red old Impala. So I told him that. He's asking what direction they went off, and I'm like, I really don't know. I think that way. He's just asking complicated questions while I'm in pain, and I needed help. Then I can start feeling the swelling on the whole right side of my face, and that's when I'm not able to really turn my neck as much. Yeah.
So the officers are asking questions, and being a retired LE, I can understand both sides of this. I was a victim of a robbery once, and fortunately, I didn't get shot, but I was held at gunpoint briefly. This was in high school. I worked at a movie theater, and the police show up, and they're mission focused on where's the bad guy, and give me a description. Which way did he go, or they, in your case? And I remember, I feel like I must have told them 4 times, like, this guy, this clothing, that direction, didn't see a vehicle, and every other cop that showed up on the scene started asking me the same questions. So I totally relate to why you were so annoyed, especially, bleeding out of your face is swelling up. You just want to get medical attention. I think those officers knew that medical attention was on the way. They have to clear that scene. They have to make that scene safe, as we say in the business, before they can allow paramedics to come in to assist you. So just a little inside baseball as far as that goes. So what's the name of the guy that helped you out, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I can't remember his name.
That's okay. Shout out to that guy. Anyway, so the police are there. They're asking you questions about, direction of travel and description, that sort of thing. You do your best to tell them. How long does it take for you to get medical attention, if you can remember?
After the police showed up, which was like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, it took another 2 minutes for paramedics to come and actually help me out. Then the whole question process starts going again. What's my name? How old am I? Where do I live? All that. And I just keep telling them all the answers, but I also tell them halfway through of them, like, just help me, help me, help me. And they're taking their sweet time, which I kind of did not like. And they took a while to help me out.
Yeah, I know from experience, the outward appearance of first responders can seem rather callous. And the thing is, this is your first time being shot in the face, and this is not their first time responding to that. They do it probably incompetent. Who knows, dude, every day, maybe. So they don't get as outwardly excited, but I'm sure they were doing their best to provide you with the care that they could. I fortunately never had to deal with anybody shot in the face, so I can't speak to their response to that. At some point, your firearm has to get taken off of you before they put you in an ambulance. So how does that work?
Yeah, so when I was on the floor and the cops came, I just had my gun right next to me on the floor, was not touching it. Slides already back, since you emptied all the bullets. He kicks the gun away from me, and I still have that extra clip on my hip. I pull it out and throw it on the floor. I'm like, here's my extra clip. Then he just leaves that right there. He doesn't even kick it or anything. He has his gun drawn out, facing down, not towards me. And
oh wait,
he's asked.
Was he aimed in on you?
No, he did not aim at me. He just had his firearm draw ready just in case. The other cops come and they're asking if there's anyone inside the shop. I did not see the other two run out the shop. I thought it was just two people running out the shop. So I said, I think there might be two more in there. That's when they get the shield out and they start with shotguns. They start clearing the building. And when they went in, they actually found a firearm on the floor and his shoe, which was actually a big help for them to find them. So they found a firearm on the floor. They left one firearm behind. They cleared the building. No one was in there. Firefighters and paramedics moved me away from the scene just in case they started shooting, and bandaged my face. That's basically it.
So I take it you took a trip to the hospital that day?
Yes.
Talk to us about arriving at the hospital. People see it in the movies, it's the typical, you're on a gurney, there's a crowd of medical professionals over you asking you questions, shouting commands, that sort of thing. Was it like that or no?
A little bit like that. So they load me in the ambulance, and they start putting the thing on my arm. I forgot what that's called.
Blood pressure cuff.
Yeah, that, and they put a needle inside me too. I forgot what that's also called. Then we're going on the way to the ambulance. We're on the freeway, and out the back window of the ambulance, I'm able to see a cop car escort us too. I don't know if there was one in front of us, but that part did seem like the movies.
And you were like, hey, I think they're trying to pull us over.
I felt like the president at the moment.
Right. That's great.
So at that time, I'm like, finally, some real good help. We're getting to the hospital fast. Once we got to the hospital, they load me out. They didn't rush me. They kind of like speed walk over there. The room that I was going in was basically at the entrance of the hospital, so it was really close. I looked at their shirt to see what hospital we were at, and we were at UCLA hospital, and then just hearing UCLA, I was like, okay, professional people,
Hmm.
hopefully. And there, I was laying down right there in the emergency, and a lot of people, probably like 12 people around my bed, just looking at me. They're examining, the doctor's telling what's wrong. I'm trying to stay in a good mood, making jokes, not jokes, but just being like, hey, how you guys doing? You just got shot in the face, and he's over here calm, saying random stuff. Then
Yeah.
after that, they gave me a drug to help me with the pain, but I did eat. So, and then they gave me like twice the dosage. I threw that up, which was very nasty, and just a lot of care. I had one cop sitting with me at all time, watching me, just in case anything happened. The cop was there asking me questions. Very, very nice guy. Shout out to that cop. He
Mhm.
knew what I was going through. Um, then he left, and two other cops came, and those cops were just they did not like me for no whatever reason.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's basically it. And then the after I was laying down, after a couple hours, they had me do X-rays. They had me lay down. I'm not able to pick myself up, so if I'm slouching down in my bed, I can't pick myself up. It hurts. They need to pull the blankets and pull me up. So I'm constantly asking them to slouch me up. They gave me a pillow. They cut my clothings. I do the X-ray for 10 minutes. I did not like laying down on my back fully straight.
Hmm.
Uh, it was very, very hard, just that pressure on my head and neck. And after the X-rays, they put me back on the bed, and they just leave me there for a couple hours, and I try and sleep it off until they put me in another room.
How long until you're discharged from the hospital?
Um, I want to say like 4 days, 4 or 5 days.
Okay, and you're conscious alert the whole time.
Yes.
And was there ever a surgery performed to remove anything from you or to repair anything inside of you?
I kept asking that, and I kept telling them if they have to remove bullets that are inside me. It feels like there's bullets inside me, but it's just the swelling. They said there's most likely bullet fragments inside me, but they can't remove those because it's gonna be more deadly to remove those, and it can cause more damage to me. So they said I can live with it, and I ended up just living with the little bullet fragments that were actually inside my head, I believe, or maybe it was just a nerve. Because when it gets hot outside, it feels like a needle pointing in the back of my head. So
That sounds terrible.
yeah, so I try and stay inside, try and stay cool. Um, to this day, I don't really feel those needles. When it gets hot, I feel like a little bit of it. It's probably like a 1 out of 10 now,
Hmm.
but before it was probably like a 9 out of 10. It would hurt a lot.
So the police question you that day in the hospital, at the scene, and then again in the hospital. At any point, did you have to go to a police station, sit down with a detective, or anything like that, or was it just that first day and then you were done with the cops?
So when they had me there in the emergency room the first day, and the cop was watching me, he kept asking me a couple questions. Then he said, homicide detectives are on their way to question you. They came 2, 3 hours later and started questioning me about a lot of stuff. I answered truthfully and honestly because why not? That's the best way to do it. And then they leave. The next day, they come back. They ask for my phone if they're able to have the password. Well, they actually already had my phone. They're asking for the password of my phone. And I said, do I really have to give that to you? And he says, you can give it to us, or we can hang on to your phone longer, and we're just going to open it ourselves. And I keep hearing a lot of people tell me that's illegal, blah, blah, blah. Apple, doesn't let that. They respect your privacy. But I didn't want to fight with them at the moment. I just told my password to them so they can hurry up and try and find anything.
Yeah, that's a call everybody has to make for themselves. I've been in the position of having to ask for passwords, but usually it's not. Usually it's not from the good guy; it's from the bad guy. But you're under no obligation to volunteer that information, and not for nothing. I don't like the phrasing of you can give me the passcode or I'll get a warrant. It's a little heavy handed for me for my liking. I'd prefer he just ask, and then if you decline to give it to me, if I have probable cause, I will get a warrant, but I'm not going to threaten you with getting a warrant. I'm not a fan of that personally. So did they say to you what they thought was on your phone that was useful? Was it timeline stuff? Like what time did you call for backup, that sort of thing, or what?
They didn't say what they were looking for. I think they were just trying to get who the boss was, because we are working in an illegal dispensary, and especially no shops in Compton, no dispensaries in Compton are allowed. It's illegal to have a dispensary in Compton, even if you have a license or anything. But we are working in an illegal dispensary, and they knew that. So I guess they were just trying to find out who the boss was and just see all my information and text messages and all that.
Interesting. So you're out of the hospital. Um, how long ago did this happen? Remind me.
This happened April 3rd.
Of 2022.
Yes.
So it's not been a month yet.
It's been over a month, a little bit.
Okay. And you get out of the hospital, you go home. Are you going back to work? What are you doing now?
Um, Going back to the day he asked for my phone, by the way, just a little information. He
Sure.
showed me for like 6 pictures, and he was asking me who the suspect was, who looked familiar. He showed me a lot of pictures. Um, I was able to point out the guy that pointed the gun at me. I'm like, yeah, that's him. He asked, they recorded me. They asked how sure I was. I said I'm 90% sure. I don't remember the mustache he had right there in that picture. Maybe he shaved it off during the shootout. Um, did not remember the mustache. And then he's asking if there's the other pictures were the other guys too. And I did not get a good look at the two people that were on the side, the one that shot me and the one that was next to him. I said these two might be them, but I'm like 20% sure. I don't want to, imprison someone that did not make a crime. So, I told him I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, good man. You don't want to implicate somebody wrongfully. Or most times, I mean, well, in my experience, I'm trying to make fewer broad statements about law enforcement in the United States, but in my experience, if I'm going to show you a photo, it's going to be in a photo lineup. So I'm going to say, out of these 6 or 8 people, 8 of them look familiar. And additionally, I'm not going to bother you with looking at pictures unless I'm pretty darn sure this is my guy. You know what I mean? So with that said, has anyone been arrested, and what's the disposition of these 4 guys? Have they been found? Did any of them not make it?
Um, Same thing like the news said. When I was the first day, I was in the hospital and I was in critical condition. I just got there. The cop told me, the one that really liked me, he was like, "You got one of them." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God," like one of them's out the street. Um, I think the third day is when they told me they arrested someone. They arrested the guy I pointed out in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
the one that pointed the gun at me. And I said, even better, but thankfully he's in jail. I was hoping he was gonna rat them out. Maybe he did. Maybe that's how they got their names. But they're on the other two that had their faces not blurred. Those two are the ones that are on the run, and that's why they didn't have their faces blurred, so people can help and look out for them. And uh, maybe they have a clue where they were at. But the other two that had their faces blurred were already caught, and the other one obviously dead.
I was going to ask. So when you say you got him, got him. He's deceased. Well,
Yes.
he made some life choices that ended poorly for him. So I'll leave that there. So the video of your incident comes out, I'm sure, in a lot of places, but it's featured on the Active Self Protection YouTube channel. Did you hear anything back from that? Anyone talk to you about it, or how's that been for you?
Um, at the active self protection video, I did have my gun shop reach out to me, and they're like, "Hey, they uploaded it, and that's a Rifle Supply in Huntington Beach.
Okay.
Really good people,
Shout
really
out.
like them a lot. Shout out to them."
Yeah.
When they uploaded it to TMZ and Fox News, I had a lot of people message me on that on Instagram, and a lot of them thought it just happened. And I'm like, no, this happened like almost a month ago. Like, you guys are kind of late on it. They just released the video without even telling me. They just released. I woke up one morning and I had like 10 messages, people sending it to me, people asking me if I'm okay. And I was just trying to leave that in the past at the moment. So, I didn't really want to have a lot of people worry about me. I just leave it in the past. It's done and over.
It's almost as if people in the news media don't care about you,
I
right?
don't know. And they came back to the shop actually and trying to interview me. And they were like, "Hey, does he still work here?" And my coworker called me. He's like, "Hey, the news keep coming over here and they keep asking me for you." And I said that you don't work here no more. Um, and they kept wanting to interview me. And after that, they were interviewing people outside the shop, like customers and random people.
Yeah, they have no shame.
Yeah. And going back to coming out the hospital, I laying down in bed basically for like a week. I'm able to walk now. Before I was not able to walk. I'm able to walk. Kind of stiff though. My posture is straight up. I have a lot of ice packs on me. I'm trying to stay cool. They gave me a lot of medicine.
Watch those pain pills, by the way. They can sneak up on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, real quick, I know this is a really, really recent event, but I always like to ask my guests about post-traumatic stress. Has there been any manifestation that you've noticed in your day-to-day, lost sleep, hypervigilance, anything like that that's happened to this point?
Yeah. So in the hospital, I wouldn't have any dreams. I'm not really a guy to have dreams.
Hmm.
Probably goes out to a lot of people
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
They
me too.
sleep. Yep. And in the hospital, I just caught myself uh, like if you're falling asleep and your head's falling down and you wake yourself up like shook and you're like, whoa, I almost fell asleep.
I know
That's
exactly what
kind
you
of
mean.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what happened in the hospital twice. I don't know if I was having like a panic attack or something. Then going to my house, I had a lot of dreams in my house, a lot of traumatic effects. I had a dream actually of me working inside a shop and getting shot again, and it felt like me getting shot in real life too. So that was not a pleasant dream. One night I kept trying to sleep. I had probably like 5 bad dreams in a row the same night, which is probably the worst night I ever had. Coming to this day, I still have weird and bad dreams. Some of them good, some of them are bad dreams of me having to protect myself in my house, me having to protect myself in my car. Very traumatic dreams.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I'm sorry that you went through this. Um, but I really appreciate you being willing to come on and talk to our audience about your experience. Hopefully, someone out there listening will be that much better prepared if something like this happens to them. So, Matthew, I applaud your bravery. I thank you for coming on. And you have my email. If there's anything I can do for you in the future, please let me know.
Yeah, no problem.
Alrighty, gang. Welcome back to the Gutowski Files featuring Stephen Gutowski, our good friend. He is the founder of TheReload.com and the host of the weekly Reload podcast. Stephen, welcome, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, this week we are talking about this is like the least fun talk we've ever had. We're going to discuss at some length the shooting in Buffalo that I'm sure you've all heard of by now. There's 2 articles over at TheReload.com. One of them is discussing President Biden's call for a new assault weapons ban, which if he got his wish would be a national law banning assault weapons, quote unquote. I don't care for that term, assault weapons. It's very vague. Like I have an assault HK pistol on my hip right now.
Yeah, it's a nebulous term. It's a political term, really. It's one that's varies from state to state because depends on which assault weapons ban
Sure.
you're operating under.
Sure.
There's different definitions for what an assault weapon is, in California compared to New York or Massachusetts.
And the other article is actually analysis done by our very own Stephen Gutowski. The title of that one is Buffalo Massacre was another shooting that should have been prevented under current law. That one is a member exclusive. So right up front, I'm going to mention that if you go over to thereload.com and sign up for a membership, you get exclusive articles like this one, which is very thought-provoking. You also get the podcast a day early. So go over there and check that out. So Stephen, first things first, President Biden has called for an assault weapons ban. Talk to us about what that means exactly.
Yeah, so President Biden was in Buffalo at a memorial for the victims of this shooting. 10 Americans were killed, 10, in particularly 10 Black people. That was the stated target of this particular shooter. He had explicitly racist motivations, according to himself, right, in his manifesto. But during that speech, he also called for basically the reinstatement of the former federal assault weapons ban from 94 to 2004. And although Biden has in recent years supported a more expansive version of that, where not only would new sales of the guns be banned, but you'd also have to register the ones that you already own. That's been his position back from the primaries in 2020. So he wants a little more expansive version of a ban than what was put in place back in the 90s. So that's what he is calling for as a way to prevent these sorts of shootings in the future. But of course, savvier listeners might realize New York has an assault weapons ban. The New York SAFE Act was passed back in 2012, which not only banned the sale of so-called assault weapons, which they define as any semi-automatic rifle, centerfire rifle with two or more or one or more of this list of features, which includes things like telescoping stocks, pistol grips, threaded barrels. There's a couple more. I think what do they call it? A barrel shroud, right? That's sort of a 90s term for like a handguard, basically.
Yeah. So basically a bunch of features that have zero impact on how deadly or effective the weapon is.
Yeah, these are cosmetic features, right, to a certain degree, and they don't have anything to do with the core functioning of the firearm, right? They don't have anything to do with what caliber it fires or the action that is used beyond the fact that these are semi-automatic guns. So that's been a long time, of course, critique of these kinds of laws.
Sure.
But the ultimate point here is that New York has the policy that Biden is calling for to implement. And this shooter in this case, he bought his gun legally in New York from a New York gun store. He bought a New York legal AR-15, and then later he illegally modified it under state law to accept detachable magazines. What he bought was a New York legal AR that had a permanently affixed 10-round magazine, and he drilled out the part that made that magazine permanently affixed, and then he replaced it with other parts so that he could accept regular detachable magazines.
For the folks listening at home, so what Stephen is saying here, if it's not clear, is that there already is an assault, quote unquote, assault weapons ban. It's been in place in New York for a very, very long time, and there was a quick way to get around it. And the other half of the story is this guy, had anyone bothered to avail themselves of any of the laws in place currently, he should never have been able to get that gun legally in the first place. Red flag laws being among them. Talk to us about that, Stephen.
Yeah, so this shooter had a history of warning signs, right? Last year, while he was still a student in high school, he had told a teacher that he had homicidal and suicidal thoughts, which prompted the school to get the police involved, who then took him for a mental health evaluation, where he was in that mental health hospital for a day and a half, but was released without, I guess, further determination that he was a threat to himself or others for whatever reason. We don't know the details of how that decision was made, but and then, so he wasn't committed because under federal law, first of all, we'll start at the very base. Federal law says that if you've been involuntarily committed as a threat to yourself or others, you can't own firearms anymore. You would not pass a background check if you went to buy a gun from a gun store, and you would be a prohibited person, meaning that even possessing a firearm would be a felony for you. But he didn't meet that standard from this evaluation, apparently. And then in addition to that, New York has its own state law, what people commonly call red flag laws. You might also call them extreme risk protection orders. And nobody initiated that process either in this case for some reason. We don't know why exactly yet. But had they done that, he would have been prohibited from owning firearms for a certain period of time. There's an initial order, like the immediate order, which would have taken the guns that he already had, and he had some other gun. He had a shotgun and a rifle that he didn't actually actively use in this attack, but he did have beforehand, and those would have been taken away. And then a longer term order could have been put in place for up to a year, which would have prevented him from buying any new guns or owning guns in that time period. And that would have covered when he went to buy his gun. He went and bought that AR a couple months after this episode, and a little while before he actually committed the shooting. So had that been done, I think it's fairly reasonable to say that he would have been prevented from legally obtaining his gun. Now, it doesn't, obviously red flag law didn't stop him because nobody used it. And maybe it wouldn't have stopped him anyway, because he was clearly willing to commit a lot of highly illegal, crimes to carry out this attack. And maybe he would have found another way to get a gun. We can't know that for sure, obviously.
Yeah, that was my next, you preempted me. That was my next 2 points I was going to ask you about. I think number one here is a determined attacker will find a way to hurt people, to injure and kill people. Even if he couldn't have stolen a gun or bought an illegal gun, this guy, without some intervention, I can almost guarantee you would have found some way to injure people. There was the Washita, Wisconsin guy who was also apparently motivated by race, and he ran over people with a car. So yeah. I think the overarching point here is there were two laws that, in theory, would have prevented this attack from happening. There was an assault weapons ban, and there was a red flag law. And I'm not for red flag laws per se. I think it's a very slippery slope when it comes to that. That's my opinion now. But there should be some mechanism by which we can prevent clearly homicidal or suicidal people from legally obtaining firearms. I just don't have the answer. I don't know exactly what that looks like. What are your thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously red flag laws are controversial, right? They're right now we have them in 19 states plus the District of Columbia, and they've been passed almost exclusively in states that are either Democratic or mixed government. Although Florida passed one with a Republican controlled government back in 2018 after the Parkland shooting, and that's sort of what gave these laws momentum, and you had a lot of them passed over the last couple of years because of events like Parkland, where there's another event where the shooter, as I talk about in that analysis piece, Parkland, Aurora are other examples of cases where the shooter had some very big red flags, and even without red flag laws, probably could have been prevented from buying guns through things like involuntary commitment or domestic violence charges in the case of the Parkland shooter, who had a history of domestic violence, but weren't. Nobody ended up intervening in those ways that would have kept them at least from buying guns legally. Now, like I said earlier, or like you just said, it's possible that being legally prohibited wouldn't have stopped any of these people from going out and carrying out their attack. You can obviously buy guns illegally in the United States. That happens all the time, unfortunately. But, obviously there's something to be said about trying to make it as difficult as possible for somebody who's displayed these sorts of warning signs to obtain firearms legally, right? That's something I think most people wouldn't want to have happen. Now, there's obviously, of course, civil rights and due process concerns with these red flag laws. That's why they're controversial, because people don't like several parts of how they work in practice, like ex parte hearings, where somebody can have an extreme risk protection order issued against them without having been able to show up in court to defend themselves.
Without due process, basically.
Yeah. Now, I mean, this is not the only case where you see ex parte hearings used in the United States, or ex parte orders. Domestic violence is another area where you'll see that sometimes, right? Where, a domestic abuser accused a domestic abuser has their children taken away, for instance, or they get a restraining order issued against them. A similar idea there. And, you can remedy that with very quick emergency follow-up hearings if the defendant is objecting to these orders, because that's another thing, that people don't always object to being subject to these orders, because a lot of times they are in some sort of mental health crisis,
right.
and a lot of time these aren't really used for mass shootings; they're used for people who have suicidal ideation, right? But there's it's certainly controversial. I had actually David French on the podcast this week to talk more about this from an advocate's point of view, because he advocates for these sorts of laws, and even he has critiques about some of this. There's details that the devil's in the details with these sorts of laws. What level of evidence, what standard of evidence you use to issue these, because you are dealing with obviously somebody's constitutional rights here when you're talking about a seizure order essentially of their firearms. Even if it is temporary, it's still a serious thing. So you have to make sure you get it right, and that's where a lot of the fighting has actually happened in the over whether or not to pass these sorts of laws.
I would liken it to the abortion debate. I have friends that believe that a baby should be able to be aborted up until its crowning, and others who believe that life begins at conception. There's sort of a sort I'm looking for. There's sort of a spectrum there, and this is not dissimilar in as much as I've got friends who believe that only the government and police should have guns, all the way to people who believe that shall not be infringed is what it means, and I should be able to have a Sherman tank parked in my front yard. So right. I think the majority of people are in the middle when it comes to the Second Amendment debate. I think most people are in the middle, and they believe that there should be some reasonable mechanism by which we can prevent someone who is clearly going through a psychotic break or a mental health crisis and is clearly a danger to his or herself or other people. There should be some way. Just if it's an extreme example, you're in the gun store and there is a guy at the counter saying, "Give me a shotgun. I want to go murder my whole family." Should we sell that guy a shotgun? You know what I mean? Like, that's an extreme example, but obviously we should not sell that guy a shotgun. So I'm glad that people smarter than me are figuring this out, because I wouldn't want to have to be the person to determine where that line is exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly complex. The reason that red flag laws, I think, get a little more traction these days is because our gun debate has become so intractable, in that we've been talking about basically the same two policies for 30 years, which is universal background checks and assault weapons bans. And nobody is moving on those issues. The political parties are not moving on those, I don't think, anytime soon. And this is an issue where it's, at least the policy is based in a person's behavior and not sort of a blanket ban of a type of firearm, right? That tends to be more favorably viewed by most Americans. But of course, if you're a civil libertarian, if you strongly believe in civil liberty protections, then you're going to want to make sure that the standards at play here aren't degrading somebody's constitutional rights, even if they might be, because and of course opponents to red flag laws will bring up things like who can request a red flag order, right? Because in New York it can be the police, prosecutors, loved ones, your family members, or school officials, right? And maybe that's an okay standard, but some places it can basically be anyone. I remember there was a case in Colorado where a police officer was involved in a controversial shooting, and the parent of the person who was shot filed a red flag order against that police officer over that incident, right? And then obviously you get the jealous ex in a divorce, a messy divorce. You could get a red flag order out of a situation like that if they're not well written, if there aren't consequences for falsely filing them, right? So there's obviously legitimate complaints, and then there's of course one of the big problems or drawbacks or weaknesses to a lot of red flag laws is that they only focus on firearms. All they do is remove that person's guns for a certain period of time. If they are legitimately a threat to themselves or others, just taking their guns away from them is probably not going to solve that problem.
It might just anger them further.
And you need further mental health help if you're in a situation like that, where serious enough threat to yourself or others that you could have your guns taken away from you, right? I think most people would agree with that sentiment. And then also it can, it could stigmatize going to get mental health treatment even further if you're a gun owner, because you could fear that might lead to your guns being confiscated, even if you aren't actually a threat to yourself or others, right? So it's complicated. There's dueling factors on each side of this. I think that in this case, if the law had been used as it exists in New York, he probably would not have been able to get his gun. And legally, as much as legally, and as much as he maybe would have tried to go get a gun illegally. He talked about not liking New York's gun laws in his, manifesto. He talked about a lot of things. A lot of them are contradictory. It's not worth reading, frankly, for most people, but it's exactly what you'd expect from a crazy mass shooter. But he talks about not liking having to use this particular gun, and that's why he went on to modify it. But he didn't actually try to go and buy it illegally when he could have tried that. So I don't know. It might very well have stopped the shooting, and certainly would have made it harder for him to get the gun. But again, it's not a simple fix. That's the problem with a lot of the conversation around mass shootings or gun violence in general in the United States. Everybody wants to say, just do this one simple trick that doctors hate, right? Like the scam.
The casinos don't want you to know about this trick with the slot machine.
Yeah, like that's how everybody treats these complex issues, and it's just not reality, right? Oh, we'll just ban all the guns and we'll be fixed. It'll be fine. Or just everybody carry a gun everywhere and it'll fix all the problems. And it's like, well, there's probably a little more complexity to why these things happen or how to solve them than just picking one simple answer.
And there's that, and there, I'm tongue-tied after that. And right there is why we're friends, because I snuggle right up, I nestle right up into the gray area and the nuance. I love the nuance. I can't stand people who are so far strident to one side of a debate or the other. You're never going to, in a representative democracy, you're never going to get anything done holding to your absolute extreme position and never giving any ground at all. I understand the Second Amendment is unique in the world and we have to protect it, but there is nuance, there's gray area, there are places where we have to recognize that all these laws, they're regulating and they're there to control the behavior of human beings, of people, and whenever people are involved, it gets weird and messy pretty quickly. And let me just say this as well. Yeah. A while back, February 9th, we released an episode of this podcast called When Things Just Go Wrong, and it's with Sarah Albrecht of holdmyguns.org. Has she been on your show? I believe she has.
No, actually, that's a good guest suggestion. I want to have somebody from one of the pro-gun suicide prevention groups on.
Well, she's awesome.
It's a big deal.
So imagine you're a concealed carrier and you realize you got to run to the bank, the grocery store, then you're meeting your buddy for a few beers. You might consider leaving your gun at home, knowing that you're going to be inebriated later in the night, or at least not completely in control of your faculties. That's not that different from if you're going through an episode, a mental health crisis or episode, and you feel yourself not in control of your faculties. You might want to have somewhere to voluntarily place your guns for a period of time. And holdmyguns.org is exactly what they do. I highly recommend it. No one is immune to having a period of time like this in their life. Anyone can go through something like this. It could be situational, it could be chemical, whatever the case may be. But if you find yourself in a bad spot, that's a great place to start. And they will basically take them to an FFL, and they agree to store them for you. If it's free or very minimal cost. And then when the smoke clears, you can come back and pick up your guns. It's not that simple, but if you listen to that episode, you'll know more about it. Steve, was there anything else you wanted to mention?
Well, I would highly recommend that too, personally, because I've lost someone close to me to suicide, and it's very important to recognize when you're struggling with that and do something about it. Get help, and if you're a gun owner, try to take advantage of these programs that exist, or just ask friends for help if you're not able to. Find anything else like that. Just ask for help in some way, because it is important to those who care about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I lost a brother to suicide, not by firearm, but to suicide, and it's it never goes away, I guess.
Yeah.
Stephen, on that rather glum note, I want to thank you for being on again this week. I always enjoy our talks, folks. If you are lamenting the lack of down the middle, sane, sober, prudent reporting on the Second Amendment on gun-related issues, please go over to thereload.com and consider getting a membership. Stephen depends on his members and only his members to fund his important work. Don't forget to leave us a rating and a review. The reviews are great. I appreciate it. Keep them coming. If you want to mention the name Gutowski in there, we had someone leave a review and it just said Gutowski. So I'm like, cool.
It's
5
the best
stars.
review.
5 stars.
The best review so far.
5 stars is 5 stars. And again, holdmyguns.org. That's Sarah Albrecht's organization. If you're going through a bad time, like Stephen said, reach out to somebody. Reach out to anybody, because there are people out there that care about you and they want you around. And yeah, Stephen, thanks again, buddy.
Absolutely.